Nostradamus, the complete prophecies, the first examination of all 1,477 prophecies and prophetic letters of Nostradamus. And now, due to be released in May and June of 97, I already have my copy right here, the Millennium Book of Prophecy. And it examines not just Nostradamus, though it does that in detail, but Edgar Cayce and so many others, a sort of compilation of all of those who have seen. Here is John Hogue. John, welcome to the program.
Great to be on, Art.
A good time of year to have you, John, as we're all beginning to think about next year.
It's a busy time for prophet scholars.
Is it?
Yes, usually many shows happen this time.
What got you interested in researching people who saw?
Well, I started off in my adult life as an opera singer. And in those moments of ecstatic singing with the orchestra raging and all of that, I would have moments of almost a spiritual experience while singing. And it became, after a time, more interesting to me to study what was the nature of that inside myself. And so I left opera and began a search that took me about 3 times around the world and continually takes me traveling around the world to examine religious movements, prophetic and paranormal traditions in an attempt to seek the truth about myself and the mystery of the universe.
That's interesting by itself. What do you think it was, John, about singing that would cause you to, in effect, go into an altered state, I guess?
Well, I can only speak for myself, and simply when singing has a way of taking you naturally into your heart. And mystics often talk about how the mind is the farthest layer of ourselves away from our truth, the heart being the doorway and to the being. And I found that with music, especially classical music, it always gave me orgasmic experiences of life. And I realized that I started asking the question, well, why can't I have an orgasmic experience of life every moment? And so I kind of lowered the gauntlet on that idea, and I've been seeking answers to that ever since.
So in other words, singing was just sort of a little peek at something you thought could be completely captured.
Yes, and I think we all have different ways that happens to us. Some people have the experience while running. Some people have it while making love. Some people have it in many other ways. We have these little accidental moments where we kind of expand beyond what we know and what we've been conditioned to be and have a glimpse of something much bigger than ourselves. And some of us pursue that as a lifetime quest.
All right. Nostradamus, is there some way to assign a batting average, if you can do that, to Nostradamus with regard to his prophecies to date?
Well, yes, in a way, he's a very unique character in the realm of prophecy, because unlike any other tradition or author of prophecies, he made great efforts to obscure himself. And it wasn't just for the difficulties that he had as a man living in the high Renaissance Counter-Reformation period with a lot of religious intolerance.
Yeah.
It was also a setup to create a device, if you will, that keeps us arguing and discussing and wondering and scratching our heads about his prophecies. So to give an idea of how accurate he has been is difficult, because to give you one example, in his own time, he became famous for predicting the death of his king, King Henry II of France. It was such a well-known prophecy. He was sort of like Gene Dixon predicting Kennedy years before his assassination.
Sure.
And he was even called to the court to explain himself. He left with his head on his shoulders, so obviously he explained himself well. And although we don't have a record of what he actually said to the king, there are enough prophecies in his writings that show that he made about 20 predictions concerning an alternative future for Henry II, where he would unite France and northern Italy and become the second Charlemagne of Europe. Now, he didn't do any of that, but he did die in the jousting accident, which makes me think that one of the aspects of Nostradamus' obscurity that has not been thought of often by scholars is that Nostradamus is writing quantum futures, that 800 or 900 of his prophecies that seem impossibly open to interpretation, obscurity, could have been quite clear to us today if Henry had not died in the jousting accident. For instance, if he hadn't died, the House Valois might have lived 100 years. It would not have been a French Revolution or Napoleon. And Napoleon not existing would not have created the situation that created Adolf Hitler and the German unification. And so on and so on. All the things that we hold as our history would have been completely eradicated by one choice of a major leader 400 years ago.
How far through Nostradamus' predictions are we? If you look at the complete timeline, how far through have we gone?
Well, we have at least 1,800 more years of history. The world is supposed to be destroyed by the expanding sun in the year 3797. And he implies that the human races will be living off this world long before and after that. So he explains that they may be living on constellations of Cancer and Aquarius. Seems to talk about two great exoduses. That one goes to Aquarius, which is almost on the opposite side of the zodiac of the ring of constellations around the Earth, to the group that goes to Cancer. And it seems like the ones that go to Aquarius don't do very well, but the ones that colonize stars in the constellation of Cancer live on for time immemorial, forever, he implies.
To go elsewhere before its native planet in the normal cycle of things is destroyed.
Yes, it's the important thing for intelligent life to keep challenging itself.
Something people should bear in mind the next time we're talking about the NASA's budget.
Indeed. Indeed. I mean, I grew up, my parents were really great about allowing me to stay home from school. Memorable times of my life was to sit at 4 in the morning, totally tired, but looking at the first images of Viking 1 of Mars. It was a remarkable experience.
Yes, and we may have a similar one soon if our probe gets there intact.
Yes, if it doesn't shut down suddenly just before it gets there. It'll be very intriguing to see if Richard Hoagland's theories will be proven by objective data.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple of them certainly have done very well of recent days. One is finding ice on the moon, and the other is Europa, which has now been said to have actual oceans on it. My, the things we're beginning to discover. Anyway, back to Nostradamus. From today's timeline and looking ahead, how does it look, John? I mean, what's coming?
Well, we are going to go through a difficult period in the next 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
To put it distinctly, mankind, or through womankind, childhood is coming to an end. We've never had to evolve up to this point. Now that we've become a global civilization, certain traditions, no matter how hallowed they are to us today, are fossilized and would not be good to use in what's coming in the new era. And the prophecies parallel this. A new existence is coming. Now, the difficulty is that to get more down to earth with our problems, there's a lot of prophecies, especially in Nostradamus, about global famine caused by too many mouths to feed on our planet. When without having Nostradamus tell us this 4 centuries ago, we just have to listen to Lester E. Brown talk about it in his article about who will feed China. And by 2030, China will require all the exports of grain that we currently have in the world in 1996.
All of it.
All of it. In a few years, he says that the greatest challenge that humanity will face is to feed itself each year. So when we look at that, and then we look at this feeling that now the Cold War is over, and in Millennium Book of Prophecy, I used to talk about how now that the Cold War is over, everybody wants to have an American dream of consumerism and its resultant pollution. If that were to happen, by 2025, you would have to build a nuclear power plant every week to match the terawatts that would be needed for that. So one thing's for certain, it's not going to happen. Everybody's not going to have the juicy, dripping American slice of consumer pie.
Well, something will then have to get in the way of all of that.
Well, we will be challenged to, I often think there are so many prophecies about that there are 3 world wars to be waged. Many great prophets have talked about that. But I have a feeling that the 3rd world war does not have to be a war against each other. That we have a choice. That it can be a war against our stupidity. Be a war against our excess. It could be a war against our past. In a situation where the entire civilization of excuses has collapsed or holding on to its power position, I think that the innate desire of the human heart to find will the majority of us to accept the unknown, embrace it, celebrate it, and change the way we've been behaving.
I'm a subscriber, John, to this population business. In the United States, we have lots of America, but we have built in cities. We have concentrated in cities so as to be able to provide, services. Already in cities, it's very clear, John, that we are eating ourselves alive. Drive-by shootings, robberies where people used to take money and back out of the door and now just shoot the guy for the fun of it. Socially, we appear to be in a sort of state of degeneration, of de-evolution almost.
Well, it is the native peoples of the world have a pretty clear insight into this in their prophecies. Many Native Americans and Aboriginal peoples of other cultures have told me that they foresee a energy gain in the world's psychic energy for about 35% for the next 30 years. And that it peaks probably around 2012, around the time of the Mayan calendar reaching the end of its cycle. And what it simply means is that people will have more energy to play with than they've had before. And the choice will be for each individual to use that energy for inner transformation or to hold on to the past, to either be 35% more in anger and rage or 35% more repressed, or to use that energy to be 35% more aware of themselves and how they relate to their world. So something that Alvin and Heidi Tolfer were talking about in one of their recent books may very well happen, that we had generation gaps begin in the 1960s, but by the 2020s we may have a humanity gap between human beings that wish to hold on to a position opposed to those human beings who want to create a new humanity and will create it and separate from the other humanity that wishes to hold on unto death to what they know.
One world where there's almost a Mad Max scenario going on, and the other a fenced-off, protective, high-tech type world.
It will be a blend, because the age that we're entering in predictive astrology is the Aquarian age, and Aquarius is ruled by paradoxes. So it is some people will choose to learn to dance with their opposites and make them complementary, the opposite ideas, and other people will choose to be polarized. And really the choice is for each of us, which kind of life we want to make.
Are there... Well, I'm going to ask about specific prophecy. I just got a bulletin here on a new Ebola outbreak in Gabon. A new outbreak of Ebola has killed 9 people there now. State radio announced today in a rare government acknowledgement, they rarely acknowledge it, of this deadly disease. The outbreak is the 3rd this year in that West African country. The entire population there is worried. Bars, streets, people talking only of Ebola, fever, and catastrophic results, and so forth and so on. So here we are again, people packed closely together, and once again, this new sort of disease breaking out. You've studied Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, and others. Do you find similarities?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes?
Yes. I have a whole chapter in the Millennium Book Prophecy called The Lemming Syndrome, which reviews the 7 final plagues of the Book of Revelation and shows parallels in other traditions. And I would say that in a certain degree, those 7 final plagues are with us today. I mean, I came to this, my background with this is kind of unorthodox. I used to be a pest controller in Eastern Oregon. And there was a communist city that was established out there, and they had all these mobile homes, items, and all this and they did what most rodents do and had a huge explosion of numbers. And because that area was prone to the animal version of bubonic plague, my job was to call the numbers so that would happen. And by actually getting my fingers into the issue, I suddenly saw parallels with human race behave with its own resources. So we've had situations in the 1920s where suddenly we live longer, we have much better medicine, food, and we have exploded in numbers. And, Mother Nature is funny and how it works with that. I mean, when it's a harsh time, the immune systems are very hardy because to survive into adulthood requires hardy systems.
And when times are easy?
Well, when they're easy, then you have a very weak immune system. And naturally, it comes to a certain point of crowding and stress that the population is exposed to diseases and immune system breakdown. And then nature culls a large number of the population. And I'm seeing a situation in the next 30 years is exactly the same for the human race if it doesn't choose to do one thing, to either be a human being or to be a mouse.
And yet we fight these things. I can imagine in earlier days, for example, the weather, John, unbelievable in the Northwest.
Yes, I'm underneath it right now.
Well, there you are. Where is it you are, John?
I'm in Seattle.
Oh, you're in Seattle. I'm hearing stories about snow piled up as it never has been.
I've never seen it this way. People who've lived there their lifetimes. Yesterday we were talking about the 50 years ago, and now people are saying we've never recorded it. I mean, we've had like 2 feet of snow. It's the freeways are rivers because we also had about an inch and a half to 2 inches that has nowhere to go, so it's floating on top of the snow.
And I guess a new one's coming in, so it's ridiculous. All right, John, hold on. We're at the top of the hour, and we will talk about the 7 final deadly plagues in and puts out the fire. Or it may even be that you would consider it in an area like Seattle in the Northwest. Many would die. But we, in essence, put out the fire by having good heated shelters. In other words, we continue to play with Mother Nature, fool Mother Nature, in effect. And I wonder if she will continue to escalate the battle. John?
The essential problem as I see it, in history and future history, is that humanity is kind of a race of sleepwalkers. Mm-hmm. We seem to be born as, you look at any child who's born as like an enlightened being, a little Buddha has come into the world. You meet that child again in 10, 15 years, and he's a crushed mediocrity. And it's like, in some way, the civilization has functioned. I won't say it's worked, but I will say it is functioned by keeping people repressed from their own innate genius and their ability to perceive the whole picture. Certainly it was a beautiful thing in the 1920s when great breakthroughs happened with polio and other diseases, but nobody really thought it out. They never sat back and said, hey, if we suddenly increase life expectancy, but we do nothing to balance that out with a population control regimen, look what's going to happen to us.
Then there's one other thing, and I'd like to run this by you, John. I'm reading a book presently by Michael Crichton, his latest, and in it, he has a very, very interesting scenario, and it is as follows. The Internet, which is growing now, as you know, by leaps and bounds, is going to turn not just our society, but all societies into a great mediocrity. He suggests that you take a few birds and you put them on an island, and they will very quickly evolve of necessity. You take many, many birds and put them on a large landmass, and they will evolve very, very slowly. You put 3 people on a committee, you get something done. 30 barely get anything done. 300 and nothing happens. And he's suggesting that the Internet will cause the same top 10 books to be read, the same top ideas to be thought about worldwide, and that the interconnection of the world will ultimately result in its demise.
Well, Nostradamus was really concerned in several prophecies about the great loss in learning that he saw around the turn of our century and onward. And I know the mystic Osho in his prophecies talks about how when the day comes when you have implants that you can plug in internet through your mind, many of the disciplines that memory and thinking things out, when we can take a when it's all done for us, and become quite stupid in a certain way.
Sure, innovation slows or stops.
But you know, another thing could happen. This very moment is always the moment the future is born in. Here we are talking to millions of people. Right? We are, this medium can also inspire people and warn people not to do this. One thing that I keep seeing in prophecies in the next century is that the religions as we know them will fade away and be replaced by what seems to be a science of self-observation, which will be the wing that's missing in the bird of science, if you will. You have the wing of objective science, the measuring of matter and phenomenon. And then we'll have a new wing that will fill the void left by religions and dogmas, and that is the science of meditation, of self-observation. And I thought, well, how, it's one thing to hear or read about prophets saying the end result, but I'm always intrigued with the bridge that gets us to there, either bridges to utopia or doomsday.
Well, all right, you said before the top of the hour, we are now, you believe, in the 7 final plagues. What are the 7 final plagues?
Well, the 7 final plagues are paralleling what the book of Revelation says, but with other prophets. I would interpret it to mean the first disease, if you will, is the breakdown of immune systems. What Nostradamus would call the that is followed by the second disease, which is the pollution of the world's drinking waters and the ocean by oil slicks and pollution. The third disease would be the hidden poisons that we have put into our atmosphere and into our water table through nuclear power plants, 1,500 nuclear detonations in rehearsal for the Third World War, which actually it has been the Third World War for the Fourth World, the indigenous peoples, because we've set most of the bombs off on their land.
Well, John, I've been wondering about these deformed frogs There was a big headline in our Las Vegas paper here recently about deformed carp in Lake Mead, which is only the drinking water for Las Vegas and much of Southern California. So
that's also dealing with the next disease, which is plague from the skies. There are, to just read one prophet, Emma Kuntz from the, she said this back in the late 1930s. She says there will be planes shaped like pencils that will take men into space, and by so doing, punch holes in the atmosphere, letting in lethal cosmic rays that will kill many millions. And there are many other references even back to the Middle Ages of swords fashioned in a different manner that cut the sky. Now, it's important in studying prophecy to kind of take your own conditioning and put it on the side and not take anything for granted and try to see and feel what it would be like to be a 17th century man seeing a rocket flying into the sky. You know, the dark metallic object with a sharp point. If I were a 16th century man, I might call that a sword, a flaming sword.
A spear of the gods, whatever. Yeah.
And it cuts up the sky. With the flame, the smoke, when you think of all the pollution that each launch causes, so that's disease 4, the plague from the sky. Now the disease has become more subtle, more existential. Disease 5 I call depression and hopelessness. And that's basically when, as one prophet says, when man is becoming mature and aware that he has been cheated by the false promises of priests and politicians, society has been feeding him all these false hopes. And the first thing wounded will be your sexuality. To me, that is heterosexual behavior. To me, it means humanity is simply losing its will to live. And that was Osho in 1985 who said that. Now, it is, so that's the thing now. We see that we are entering such a new era where none of our old traditions and values matter. And we have not reached the point of excruciating dilemma and crisis where we have to create a new morality. So we're kind of in the twilight zone between the two, which leads us to disease 6. And that is the opiate of false prophets, I call it. It is all the predictions that every religious tradition seems to have, pointing the finger at everybody else as having false prophets and saviors. Since they're all doing it to each other, my feeling is that it's reading it. It may very well be that something is new and it's an organism that is massively rocking the earth. It later, with centuries, becomes an organization, a political unit, a dogma. And there seems to be a cycle in history and in prophecy where the established dogmas of today reach their crystallization and have to be broken down by new, radical mystics and people that are often called cult leaders who are later teaching. So in a way, the Antichrist that everyone keeps talking about could just as much be the established religious thinking as it is some new character who wants to undermine things.
Well, it seems to me, John, the breakdown in confidence in our present political system is already very well underway. As a matter of fact, I've felt it on a personal basis. The right, the left, the middle. I look at what Washington does these days, and I've almost given up, John. I tell you, the two major political parties seem to do nothing that in the end is all that different and nor pleasing in any way. So that process seems well underway, and I think I'm joined by many in that.
Oh yes, it's almost like if we picture ourselves on the veranda of Leo Tolstoy's mansion countryside, and it's 1896, and we're thinking about the entire direction that Russia is going in. The Tsar is still established, the Duma and everything is still there, but it has very interesting parallels to our current political system. But it's functioning, it's creaking along. People are talking about reform, but they really don't mean it. You know, we have the Gingrich places of the world who talk a lot about revolution, but really not putting their money where their mouth is. And then, if you then look at a few years ahead, we might get the first warning of revolution in the 2005, just like in 1905. And then maybe in the second decade of the 21st century, as some prophets believe, there may actually be a new civil war in America that will lead to a new constitution by 2025. Yeah, and the Mormon prophets are the source of a lot of those predictions about the second civil war, and it's not the same as the last one. It is a civil war that's basically similar to prophecies about World War III in general. It's a global civil war. It's a breakdown of society as we know it in preparation for a new society. It's a war between families, between streets, cities, states, and whatnot. It's basically what I like to call a world war free-for-all.
Mad Max.
It's Mad Max, and my hunch is what will happen is in some regions, it will be like the other alternative, which is people seeing the threat of their stupidity as dangerous as people used to see Adolf Hitler in the last 50 years. And, America galvanized itself, certainly had its warnings of Hitler, and then when the war took place, suddenly incredible creativity and unity came in the nation. It would be just wonderful if people, instead of fighting each other, could fight their stupidity in the same way they fought World War II.
Well, it is clear to me, John, and you mentioned this earlier, I've traveled the world, and third world nations worldwide are striving now to be what we are, and they're beginning to have the problems we have. Pollution that makes some of what we have look like great air, believe me.
I know, I lived in India for most of the 80s, and yes.
in Bangkok, for example, half the police who direct traffic have lung disease, serious fatal lung disease. I mean, it's horrible, absolutely horrible. And these third world nations are all moving and wanting toward what we have. That's not going to be possible, and the world will collapse unto itself long before they achieve it.
And this is why what we're doing right now tonight and what the internet can do for the world is so important. These tools make the alchemy to make this, with our awareness and creativity, a system that warns people in the third world, that warns and also offers alternatives to the status quo ideas, and gets people more in a position to make their own responsible choices.
Oh, you're quite right. As a matter of fact, I've read to you that business article related to you. I don't necessarily agree with that. Diversity as well as secular. It does not have to.
Everything, for nuclear power is not the enemy. It's the way people use it. Ultimately, it's not the things we create that are a problem. It is the unconscious sleepwalker who's not aware of him or herself, who creates these things, who only thinks of some of the consequences of their creation and not all of them. And the only way that can initially be changed is the means to provide new data, new ideas to as many people as possible, and then allow them the freedom of choice to respond, be able to respond, responsibility, if you will, be responsible to their own lives.
All right, well, I guess I would have to say this. The popularity of my program, the kind of program I do here, accounts for being able to suggest there is this new thinking that has begun. However, the major mass media, I'm afraid, really has not caught up with that yet.
No.
And until that happens, there are going to be many more sleepwalkers out there than are going to be enlightened. Yes.
Indeed, but there's a two-edged sword with it. The more sleepwalkers, the more we step towards the new century. Every day we enter deeper into the 21st century, the weather's going to get worse, the food's going to get less, the resources are going to get less, and basically even the idiotic mainstream press, which I've also had a lot of experience with, even they will have to face this problem. I mean...
All right, John, hold it right there. We'll be right back. We're at the prophecy, that of Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, and many more. John, just sort of a general question. Why is it good to know?
Well, it's good to know rather than, in my opinion, my experience, it's better to know than to believe. So if you believe, if you strip belief of all of its sugar coatings and cloaks and metaphors, what you find is belief, bluntly, is standing upon ignorance. And it's been the basis of many religions and many political concepts, and probably one of the basis for a lot of our misery in history.
Yeah, but let me be the devil's advocate for a moment and say,
All
look,
right.
Ignorance, okay, fine. You want to say I'm ignorant because I don't want to know, fine. But for me, ignorance is bliss. I'm living my day-to-day life. I have a family. I have things to do. I listen to these coming disasters and changes, and it just causes me mental distress. I'd rather just be blissfully ignorant.
And that's, to put it bluntly but compassionately, exactly how our society is created, is into mediocrity. Because as long as you're a good machine in your family unit that's very controllable by the powers that be, then you will continue to march off to the world wars and march off to this and that and ignore the dangers that are coming. And I'm not really condemning people for it. I feel great compassion for all of them. I'm in the same boat anyone else is in. Through meditation over the last 20 years, I've come to understand how conditioned and programmed I am, and what a mediocrity I am. And it has been, there comes a time where you just can't stay a machine anymore. You start wanting to break loose. And, it's a choice. I would never want to force anyone to join in this journey with me unless they really wanted to do it, because it can be painful. You have to drop a lot of illusions. Then again, talk about the bliss of ignorance. There's another bliss that starts to arise when you do start dropping a lot of these things. And it's a bliss of knowing something of true integrity about your being, that no matter what your priests or your politicians or pedagogues say, I cannot sway you from your own majority of one truth. And that grows. And it has a subtle bliss to it that is much, much bigger and much more worth being, in my opinion, blissfully ignorant.
How far would I have to have my head in the sand for 1997? My way of asking, what can you tell us about this year that lies just ahead?
In the Jewish calendar, it is the millennium. It is in the solar calendar a few years off from the millennium. It is a time where I think we will see even more dramatic weather changes. I would not at all be surprised if the mainstream news even gets more daring about accepting the fact that we have a global warming condition coming. At the same time, it is a time which will probably see a push and a pull of people who wish to stay righteously involved with what they believe from the past is true, and at the same time reacting to that or responding to that. More and more people are going to want to shake that off.
All right. Well, a lot of people in your area, there in Seattle, say, global warming? Ha, 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 ha. Who are you kidding? It's getting cold.
Well, in fact, this is a symptom of global warming.
Yes.
These, when you have hotter equatorial regions, the tropical moisture is pumped much farther north because of the strength of a warmer planet. And what we have happening in Seattle, and which happened also in the eastern seaboard in the fall, is tropical moisture that's pumped up and pushed so fast that it actually goes far enough north that it hits cold air and creates huge snow events. And the huge snow events are actually the first symptom of global warming.
Right. I just wanted to make you say that because I know what a lot of people up there are going to be saying. And when you have a change in one area, it produces a change in another area. In other words, weather is an interesting sort of thing. And for example, if you have rain in one area, or a lot of it, then you have dryness or even drought in another area.
This should begin around 1998 and get quite intense around the turn of the century. We may see large areas. We may see the Mississippi River area and areas in Africa and India suffer like similar to what we saw in the mid-1980s.
Wow.
And hopefully we will take these tragedies and use them in the right way, soldiering our awareness rather than burying ourselves deeper in the sand.
What about Earth changes, aside from the weather, which I fully agree, we're going to have a terrible year, and it's well underway. You don't have to be a predictor, it's already occurring. What about Earth changes, earthquakes, that sort of thing?
1998 is going to be a busy year, and the spring of 2000 is also going to be a busy year in Earth changes. Although I do not subscribe to the maps of huge areas sunk. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what you will see, and I've had a pretty good track record with earthquake predictions, you will see sinkages of land as extreme as the 1964 Alaska quake in the next 5 years in regions. But you won't see the West falling into the sea. Even Edgar Cayce can get that wrong. In fact, Edgar Cayce was a courageous enough prophet to actually record and ask his friends and all, gee, I seem to get that wrong. I wonder how I messed up my uncle. What happened? He was humble enough to do that.
Well, you've studied not just Nostradamus, but Cayce and 89 others at least. How much real similarity, when you break it all down and study it, and that's what you've done, how much similarity is there in what they all say?
There is a lot of similarity in basic themes. You have, shortly after the turn of the century, everybody pretty much running out of predictions of this control group of about 100 prophets with a proven track record.
As though we ran out of time.
Or we stopped being so predictable. Because after 23 years of studying this, I've come to the conclusion that prophecy works because we're predictable. We repeat the past and call it the future because we keep conditioning every new generation. We seed them with our mistakes and our biases and limitations and mediocrities so that they maybe are dressed differently and have different technologies, but essentially they do the same stupid things. And it is that syndrome, that rut of repeat that makes prophecy work. We're coming up to a period where we can't do that anymore. So it may be the racial imperative of the human race to nurture genius and spontaneity to survive.
You know, John, it seems when you look at our social behavior as though race relations should be, if we're on the right track, should be improving. That the differences that mark us with skin color or religion should be disappearing. And yet, they appear instead to be sharpening. Race relations, yes, we have passed laws in this country, civilized as we are, but we have not yet changed hearts. In fact, if anything, it's going the wrong way.
Well, yes, because in a way we are not really yet taking this seriously or sincerely. Because you see, when you look at all the laws made and you look at the kind of testimonials for change from Clinton down, what you're seeing is people who say, yeah, we want to build a bridge of the 21st century, but we want to take all our garbage over there with us. And the problem is we're going to have to strip bare of all that stuff when we cross that bridge. And when we get on the other side, we have to start all over again.
Yes.
All right. And that's a beautiful thing. It can be.
All right. Well, I have many, many people who would like to talk to you, so let us begin to go to the phones and see what's out there. How's that?
Okay.
All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Would you turn your radio off and go right ahead?
Okay, great. This is the first time I've been able to get through. I'm calling from Arizona.
Yes. Yes.
And I would like to ask, he was talking about the 7 plagues.
Yes.
From Revelations. And I was wondering if you're going to consider that true, then that means that I would like to ask if he considers the entire content of the Book of Revelations to be true. And if he does, then what does that really mean?
Well, it is a question of the cart or the horse. Although the Book of Revelation has these seven final plagues, there's a wealth of other religions that also had their scriptures concerning these seven final plagues. So, depending where your bias is, you could equally say, well, the Book of Revelations matches the Hindu prophecies of the Puranas, or it matches the Dhammapada, or and so on. So, it's in my case, I look at them all, and I try through meditation to look at my own biases and the biases of prophets, their hopes, their fears, and projections that they kind of cloud the magic mirror, if you will, with dust. Yes, we have to brush off those politically correct ideas and religiously correct ideas and have a fresh look at the prophecies. And when that is done, I see the correlations beyond the agenda, the essential visions. For instance, there are so many traditions that are looking for a new Messiah to come, not just the second coming of Christ, but in my book, Millennium Book of Prophecy, I have a whole page full of just an example of dozens of different Messiahs that are coming.
John, do you believe the Antichrist lives now?
The Antichrist, as I see it, is that which chooses not to grow. And I see the Messiah as the collective consciousness, the will to become human beings. I don't see it as personifications. I think that's where a lot of people may miss what's coming, because Jesus, who even quoted verbatim some of Buddha's ideas, like do unto others as you have them do unto you,
sure.
Comes, it was totally not in the mainstream's agenda. And now what we have is people collectively in the mainstream expecting a Jesus Christ from 2,000 years ago to basically come again. And as all too predictable, the vast majority of people will miss the actual event because of their prejudice.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Good evening.
Where are you, sir?
I'm Steve in Ohio.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
I just wanted to tell them that it's I'm sitting here in Ohio on the snow belt, and it's 60 degrees.
60 degrees in Ohio?
Yep. It was 60 degrees yesterday, and it was about 58 today.
Well, where John Hogue is, in Seattle, it looks like Ohio.
Yeah, I know what it should be, yeah.
It was 25 last night, now it's 45.
No, in Seattle?
Yeah, it's just within 12, 15 hours it did a dramatic change. And again, very greenhouse effect in quality.
Well, that's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you very much for saying it.
Bye, Steve.
We could take calls from now until doomsday about the weird weather. And I think when the hurricane season comes again and spring dawns, it's going to be an awful one. Once again, John, not hard to predict, is it?
Not hard to predict, but amazing that people centuries ago were predicting it. That's what makes it intriguing. I mean, it's not so hard for us to see it in the near future, but when a man at the turn of the century named Anton Johansson predicted greenhouse hurricanes going as far north as England, and at a time when that just wasn't happening, it's pretty remarkable. And another important point, 1996 actually had more damaging storms than the previous year, even though there were not as many storms.
Oh, you know, if we keep fooling Mother Nature and putting out these fires of diseases and protecting people from ravaging storms that otherwise would kill with great new technology and warnings, won't Mother Nature ultimately escalate the battle?
I think yes. It's really a question back to the mice and men syndrome. It's like if we just allow trust in our ignorance and trust in faith that something's going to save us and just go on blissfully unconscious of what we're doing, then we're no better than the mice who overpopulate their range and then Mother Nature takes care of them. Now, the beauty about being human is that we have much more capability to see this coming and change it. But it means we have to drop something. We're going to have to pay for it. And we can't have our cake and eat it too. We may have to have a moratorium on all births around the world for 20 years if we want to deal with it without a great disaster.
Well, again, I really think the forest analogy is the best one. You keep putting out little fires. You keep putting them out, putting them out, and it's not a matter of when there's going to be a big, tragic fire, whether there's going to be one. It's a matter of when. There's going to be one. We see it year after year after year after year in the forested areas of the West and the Northwest.
And to use your metaphor, there have been Forest Service people who have seen this problem and are now beginning to do control burns where they do burn a lot of the undergrowth in large-scale burnings. I mean, I used to be a bush fireman myself, and you see that happening now.
It is true, but they're still the minority.
But, it is true, and the way I look at it is that we're on an uphill battle. It's like the mountain peak is still way above us, but I celebrate every step that I can take towards it.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue on Dreamland. Hello, where are you? Hello there. Going once, going twice, gone. Wildcard line, you're on the air with John Hogue. Hi.
Hello, this is Aries in Illinois.
Yes, sir.
A moment ago you said, not you, Art, but Mr. Hogue, said that he believed that the Antichrist wasn't a literal person, but Nostradamus predicted that there would be 3 Antichrists, and the third one was Mabus, right? And the first 2, I believe, were...
It was Napoleon Roy, Napoleon the King, Hister, for Adolf Hitler, and Mabus and Alus Sanguinaire are 2 possible names.
Yeah, Mabus, wouldn't that be Saddam Hussein?
Well, it is one of the high candidates, certainly. It is also possible that, unlike the first 2, the man could be a very minor character. Because he says in that prophecy that Mabus soon dies, as if he's the first casualty of his own war. And that almost sounds similar to Gavrilo Princip, the Serbian assassin who shot Franz Ferdinand and triggered World War I. It could be equally some terrorist organization or a group of dedicated terrorists who set off a nuclear terrorist event that triggers World War III. When they die, they're the first people to die. So it's always important with prophecy to never assume what happened in the past will happen again in the future. But at the same time, because of predictability, one has to equally be aware that it could be repeated again.
While we don't have the Cold War to worry about, we sure do have terrorism to worry about. And perhaps they will sow the seeds that will assist Mother Nature, whether it be with biological agents or nuclear weapons. What do you expect?
Well, I expect that where we had in the 70s and 80s the politics of oil, we're going to have a new political world by the 2020s, where China will fill the void left by the Soviet Union. We'll have 2 superpowers again. And China will use its alliances with the Middle Eastern OPEC nations to counterbalance America's use of wheat as a political weapon when there's no more food. So if there is a global situation by 2010 or 20s, you will see this will be the weapons that are used to wage in a world balance of power.
I surely believe that, John. I took a trip to China, to Hong Kong, and then up into the economic areas, and then finally up into Canton. And, John, what I saw in China will haunt me for the rest of my life. I saw economic activity that would remind one of the old industrial United States, only on a scale that boggles your mind. The people in this country, in the world, have no idea what's coming with China. No idea at all, and the only way to know is to go and see it for yourself. John, hold on. We'll be back with you in a moment. John Hogue, who Edgar Cayce, and combines it with as many as 89 more. And we'll get back to John Hogue in a moment. In snow country, Seattle, John, I could read you many, many, many thankful and good faxes, but instead I will challenge you with one that I received that is not complimentary.
Oh, good.
And it simply says, what a charlatan. Does your guest read tea leaves too? Now, what we have here, John, is anger generated by fear. And one of those sleepwalkers out there just happened to tune in tonight and is scared to death by what he's hearing. And so he writes a fax like this. How do you respond to somebody like that?
He should be scared to death. He should be scared to death because if he's wanting to hold on to his illusions to doomsday, anything that shakes that should happen. But, you know, it's tea leaves. It's such a cliche. I was hoping that the person would actually say something more intelligent. Are there any other nasty faxes that are a little more elegant?
No. That's the only one so far.
Oh, too bad. Oh, well. I mean, it's sticks and stones and cliche bones don't disturb me much. And if it does, that's something for me to look at.
All right.
But I was wondering if maybe it's not the right moment, but I have finally on the World Wide Web, and I was wondering if I could say where people could reach me and send their faxes direct.
You may indeed.
All right. The it is www.lauralee.com/HOGUE.HTM. And if people want to get my books, they can call the radio bookstore at 1-800-243-1438.
All right. Your new book, The Millennium Book of Prophecy, it suggested was not due out in a massive way until spring. People can get it now?
Yes, in fact, it is the special cyber, fully illustrated version. I created the first special edition, which looks like it came from the middle of the next century. It has a lot of cutting-edge computer graphics and unique layouts to kind of subliminally catch you as much as the word. And there's only a few thousand copies left of that, and there's going to be a print-only version that's coming out in May.
All right.
And the book you mentioned earlier of Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecies, is not going to be out until April. I just finished it 2 days ago.
2 days ago, all right. Is time going to end, John?
Time ends every moment. Sometimes I think time is a projection that we try to clothe the eternal present in. Nostradamus talked about that in his letters and confessions about his occult work. He talked about stilling his mind and his body and his emotions so that he could reach a state where he could embrace the eternity of the present, he called it. Almost like what we might call the continuum of now. And so time's a really funny thing. Our concepts of time are almost like many of the other projections we put on things. They change according to our perceptions.
I've thought of time mostly as our invention. Something that we really had to create so that we would know when to do this or to do that or to be able to observe the passage of time and events. But it seems to me to be really our invention. At any rate, what about, and I see you write in here, about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse?
Yes, it's time for an update.
The 4 hell riders of doomsday?
Yes, I thought it would be fair to have the allegories of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse be 2 men and 2 women to give fairness to all allegories.
I guess.
And so I changed them, and if people go out and buy the book, they can still see the special artwork. We even recreated the Dürer wood prints, made them in color, and the first Hell Rider, the Trailblazer, if you will, is what I call overpopulation. And she is riding a starving horse, and her weapon is a empty begging bowl, and she has an enormous pregnancy. And she is the population birthing urge run amok. You know, if we dealt just with the overpopulation issues, so many of the problems we have in the world could be eradicated. It's just too many of us and too little to go around. she is followed by the second hell rider, who is a ravaged earth goddess called Earth Trauma. And this is Mother Earth's reaction to us overburdening her world with ecological disasters and disruption. She is followed by a knight with a hamster's head and a huge syringe as a lance, and he is the Lemming syndrome. And he is the repressed collective desire for unlovingness and self-destruction that breeds itself in our physical world into diseases. And we've talked at length about that chapter. The final Hell Rider is a dark angel descending on the Middle East from space with a borrowed Russian nuclear weapon as his lance. And he has he looks like a terrorist, and on his breast is a happy face button. And he is called the Third World's War.
You know, all of those four horses are either at a full gallop right now, or the riders are saddling up.
Yes, and then the most important issue is the horse they all ride. The motive force that makes these four dimensions of prophetic unconsciousness, prophetic antichrist, if you will, come into our world. And that breed of horse that they ride is what I call a nightmare unconscious. And that is the lack of humanity in us. We sometimes seem to be, as we said before, machines, animals that talk, as the Suleiman Dede, the Sufi mystic, used to call us. And the thing to understand is this unconsciousness, to understand why we're unconscious, why this runs our lives. I mean, to go back to your idea of time, we of course need language and we need labels to function in this world, and we always will.
Right.
But the way we're trained is we start identifying with these labels to the point that we're ready to go to war for little pieces of cloth on sticks, for you of religion versus someone else's religion. And it's just amazing how over time we have allowed ourselves to be completely identified with our labels rather than use them.
Here's Larry in Abilene, Kansas. Larry writes, it may disturb and or surprise you to know just how many people out there now would support, even look forward to, a civil war in this country. I fit into this category. But let me make it clear, I'm not a warmonger or an insurrectionist by nature. Everything's out of control. Our government, our citizenry, I'm ready. Let's go to war.
Probably a lot of people said that in the Weimar Republic, too, after World War I in Germany. There were a lot of people that were really upset with the chaos that came to Germany, and they were thinking, it's time for a revolution. Mm-hmm. Some of them wore brown shirts and helped Adolf Hitler restore order. And that is a thing to be aware of, is the Aquarian Age is actually, the next 20 centuries, we're going to have to watch out for the Hitlers and the Stalins, because those are aspects of the future. Adolf Hitler was actually quite a good prophet, even though he was quite dark. And he predicted the Cold War a few days before he committed suicide. To a T, he predicted it. And he also talked about the rise of fascism would come again in 100 years by the 2040s. And one could almost see the danger of that if the whole world behaves like the chaotic Weimar Republic, breaking down and in chaos. People in their unconsciousness will demand order.
All right, well, there will be chaos if I don't go back to the phone. So, first-time caller line, you're on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Yeah. Hi, John.
Yes, speak up, sir. You're not too loud here. Where are you?
Out here in Antioch, California.
All right, go ahead.
Hey, I got a question for you. Hey, what would you call Nostradamus, a modern Nostradamus, at this time? Would you call him a clairvoyant, remote viewer?
All right, well, maybe we ought to ask, is there a modern-day equivalent of Nostradamus on Earth and alive now?
No, not to my knowledge, and also, there are a lot of candidates that I'm looking at, but I usually, with every candidate, say, all right, everybody can claim to be a prophet. Give me 6 months of predictions, and if you're 75% accurate or over, then I will investigate you further. So it takes a little time. I would say the last person that would match that would be Edgar Cayce. And I would say a little more recently, the mystic Osho was quite accurate in his predictions. I mean, he predicted AIDS 5-6 years before it happened, many of the things that are happening. A lot of the mystics of the 20th century, like Gurdjieff and Adidas Santosha, who used to be known as Free John, actually are quite good prophets.
Art?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you'll be receiving a letter, 14 pages. It's coming in at Mail Express.
All right.
All right. Take a glimpse out of that, and you might be calling me back.
All right. Thank you very much for the call, and have a good evening. Wildcard Line, you're on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Hi, my name's Shirley, and I'm from Pahrump, Nevada.
Shirley, you're a neighbor.
Yes.
All right.
I have a question. I've been looking for this woman that's an author. She wrote a book saying, I don't know if she was hypnotized, but Nostradamus came to her and asked her to write down 1,000 different interpretations.
Oh, yes.
Because we were interpreting them wrong.
Yes, I think that must be Dolores Cannon you're talking about.
I think you got it right.
I have a problem with Dolores. I think she's very sincere, first off, I want to say.
Okay.
But I was on a show, Ancient Prophecies, on NBC, where they had our interviews back-to-back.
Mm-hmm. And
I was rather surprised and shocked that neither her nor her spirit guide has obviously never set foot in Nostradamus' secret study, because it was described completely wrong to the one that actually exists today, which you can go see in Salon en Provence in France.
Oh, okay.
So the problem with channeling is there are very few channelers that really measure up to their own press clippings.
I couldn't agree more. It is my one great area of skepticism, and it's not because channeling may not exist, just because there's so much room for fraud.
I mean, Edgar Cayce's one of the few that I don't have that feeling with. He was sincerely a great medium. Because he has the proof. You know, he documented all of his readings, and you can check them against events.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Good evening, Art.
Where are you?
Valley, Nebraska.
All right, good. Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. One is, what do you think we should do to prepare for this millennium? I mean, we should listen to our own intuitions, our dreams, our gut feelings about the future, or...
Well, yes, I would, those, and I would also cultivate an ability to understand, to reflect upon one's habits. You know, why do I think this way? Why is it that sometimes people push my buttons and I get emotional? And it's almost, I think the most important message could be that each individual listening tonight try to find a way to observe their own thoughts and feelings and emotions without judgment, just breathing and relaxing and just seeing them like a movie, and seeing where they originate from. When you see one image, you pull the layer aside and see if there's something underneath that. If you hear a voice of authority in your mind, see if it has the voice of your father or your mother or your priest or politician. If it doesn't have your voice, then it's probably not your truth. It's borrowed from something else, from someone else.
What do you think about dreams?
Well, dreams are the way, my experience of dreams is it's the way the subconscious is trying to tell me what I'm repressing.
Tell what we're repressing?
Yes, I have the belief from meditating for 20 years that human beings are basically trained from day one to repress a lot of their truth and their feelings to survive in a world that wants mediocrities. And so when you start coming out of that, you suddenly realize that there's a whole lot of things that your subconscious is trying to tell you, that because you don't find ways to express it or cathartic in a cathartic meditation or something to release it, to see it, it becomes many of the diseases and problems that happen to people. I mean, many of the people who suddenly freak out and kill a bunch of people with guns are people who hold their rage all inside of them. Maybe the people who beat their wives and children are people that don't beat a pillow 20 minutes a day. I mean, if everybody beat a pillow 20 minutes a day, you would lose a lot of the rage that you would throw on your fellow man and woman.
Because for the past 5 years, have gotten a lot into dreams, and I've been having a few prophetic visions of what happens in my future, and a lot of times I just don't listen to it.
All right, well, that brings up a good point. John, I was talking to a guest about dreams not long ago, and we rarely, except on shows like this, compare dreams. And it was suggested that we have a dream registry, literally, where people can record their dreams, and we can begin to decide if mankind is beginning to have mass prophetic dreams of the future. Because otherwise I know of no such collection point of that sort of information.
Well, they call it in some cases the Akashic Record. I remember when I had a near-death experience that I had what may have been an experience of a glimpse of that. And later in my studies in India, mystics taught me that there are levels of collective. There's the collective unconscious and there's the collective super unconscious.
Exactly.
That we not only have personal unconscious dreams, but we can, with awareness, tap into the collective dreams of the human race. And in the same way, we can awaken to collective consciousness and collective superconsciousness, the apocalypse of the Buddhas, if you will. You know, apocalypse means enlightenment in ancient Greek.
All of this begins to sound a little New Agey, but what I'm saying is, what if something awful happens and it turns out that maybe millions of people were having similar dreams, and somehow, because we never compared, never collected, we missed it. The message was there. We were all being warned.
It's happening.
But we missed it, John. All right, hold on. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we'll be right back. My guest is John Hogue. He's a Nostradamus scholar, and there will be more. From the high desert, an area near Dreamland, this is Dreamland.
From the Kingdom of Nye, you're hearing Dreamland with Art Bell. To participate in the program, call toll-free 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-8255. First-time callers, area code 702-727-1222. Or the wildcard line at 702-727-1295. This is the CBC Radio Network.
Facing a brand new year shortly. Talking about the future. John Hogue is my guest, a Nostradamus scholar. Back to him in a moment. Is left to it. First-time caller line, you're on the air with John Hogue. Hi.
Hi.
Where are you, sir?
My name's John. I'm in Lahaina, Maui, Hawaii.
Excellent. All right, John, meet John. Go ahead.
Hey, John. What about, I have two questions for you. The first one, what about this volcano that's coming up off the Big Island? Have you heard about it?
Ah, yes.
Yes, it's definitely a hot spot on the planet. Still got a lot of miles of water to climb up out of before it surfaces, but that doesn't mean there might not be major seismic activity in southern part of Hawaii, the Big Island, because of things that are going on there. There's also a string of volcanoes on the edge of the continental shelf all along the San Juan de Fuca Strait, and that could cause some major events.
And I might add that in the Caribbean, Montserrat is getting ready to let go big time.
Yes, and Rainier did a little earthquake rumbling in the last 2 years. I remember I was on Northwest Afternoon saying in July, August of 95 there might be some event, and fortunately there was only a small quake on the top of it. So there again, predictions can be changed by events or directions we take. I mean, Nostradamus made it very clear that in his writings that the future is not written in stone. It's full of quantum possibilities born out of the present.
Caller, any idea what you would like to name your new Hawaiian island?
It's already named. I forget the name of it. It starts with an I, something.
Oh, darn. All right.
Hawaiian name.
A missed opportunity, no doubt. All right. Thank you very much. Wildcard line, you're on the air with John Hogue. Hi.
Hi, it's Terry from Calgary. I was just curious. Earlier he some of the modern day prophets.
Yes, you're Calgary, Alberta?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was just curious as to notice the avoidance of people that you've had in your show, like Gordon Michael Scallion and Robert Gospel. I'll just hang up and listen to see if there's any comments from those individuals.
All right. Gordon Michael Scallion, Native American a prophecy, that sort of thing. Do you look at that, John, along with everything else?
Oh, yes, I look at everything that's going on and study it and see its accuracy. I don't actually put a lot of credibility to a lot of Gordon Michael Scallion's predictions, because actually lately he's had a lot of them not be correct. And I just think the map of the altered America
future map, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a very old map. It's Edgar Casey and decades afterwards, the Earthquake Generation book written by Jeffrey Goodman had very similar maps, and to make it sound like it's something new, it's just it's not.
Well, I'm not wild about it because where I am is more or less underwater.
And I think I would stake my reputation as a scholar that it will not happen that way.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue. Hi.
Yes, hi, John. Hi, two questions for you. Question number one, I want to ask you a question about whether it has to do with Nostradamus and or other prophets, if they've talked about our first contact with extraterrestrial life. And let me relate that to something that will happen in 1997, and also it relates to Richard Hoagland, who Art Bell has had on many times on the show. As you know, the Mars Global Surveyor will orbit Mars September 97, and starting about January 98, it'll begin its mapping mission of Mars. What I want to ask you for question number one is, in relation to Richard Hoagland's theories that I feel does have some merit and may be true of the so-called face on Mars, have there been any prophets who've said in one form or another that something like a spacecraft like coming up Mars Global Surveyor will or will not verify, make it testable, the theory that there is maybe in fact an artificial face on Mars?
All right, sir. Where are you calling from?
West Hartford, Connecticut.
All right, excellent. Yes, we've got a probe going. You know about the artifacts on Mars, John?
The theory of them, yes.
Yes.
They even have the books and pictures, yes.
What do you think?
I see nothing in Nostradamus that could even be stretched to talk about the Mars probe. Although I'm sure, like, people will try to stretch O.J. Simpson and the Bloody Glove in Nostradamus. I'm sure somebody will give it a try. But after 20 years of studying Old French and studying Nostradamus' ways of using it, I have not seen anything of that nature. However, there are definitely going to be soon some discovery of extraterrestrial life, which could be as big a shift in the Earth's axis of consciousness as the other predictions which talk about a shift of the physical axis of the Earth, which causes great cataclysms.
So you feel that revelation, that of extraterrestrial life, is imminent?
Oh, yes. It's in fact, it's amazing how much the lid can still be stuck on it. You know, it's already known. It's almost as if the powers that be are just trying to find a way that they can utilize it to keep people mediocre. The problem is that once you let this genie out of the bottle, you're going to have what Arthur C. Clarke mentioned, that overnight global government, United Nations, all of that will work because people will drop their national difficulties because of the fear they will have of some enemy out there.
Indeed. All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Good evening. This is Chris in Ashland, Oregon.
Yes, sir.
And I'm very interested in Black African spirituality and culture, and I find that it has like a lot of beauty and festivity and love to it. And I'd love to think that somehow those kind of traditions may have an important role in the future of all of us, particularly in the racial issues. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the record of prophecies that might indicate anything like that.
All the native peoples of the world talk about the return of native values. some of them get a bit extreme and say that all technology will disappear and the bubble flow will return and what have you, and in a way sound as extreme as other righteous religious traditions who think everything will conform to their worldview. However, if you take that bias off and look at it, one sees already the white people of America starting to take on a lot of the traditions of native peoples. You see a renaissance of that in the West here, and this is something that I think Ray Bradbury said really poetically in his Martian Chronicles, that at the end of the book, the human beings who colonized Mars ended up becoming the Martians that they had destroyed. They started taking on the spirit of the Martians. In the same way, one of the great crimes of humanity, what the white men have done to native peoples in the world, may never be reconciled, but strangely enough, the people who raped those societies may eventually take on their wisdom.
In a recent contemporary movie in the theaters right now, Tim Burton, in a movie called Mars Attacks.
I saw it.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah, just a few days ago, yeah.
The first thing destroyed is my little town, John, Pahrump, Nevada, of all places. I don't suppose Nostradamus or any other prophet, old or modern, has Pahrump being destroyed. Huh?
No, I can't even find it in anagram.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Hogue. Where are you calling from, please?
Cape Coral, Florida, Art.
Cape Coral, Florida, all right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was wondering what he thinks about the problem with the government, not really overpopulation, but even our own government pays the farmers not to grow food, and in other countries they use food as a weapon to neutralize their enemies. And, I don't see the problem being overpopulation. It's being a tyrannical government.
All right. Good question.
Well, it's a good point, but what will you do when there's 20 billion people in the year 2020? And then in another decade or two, there's 15 billion. It will soon, maybe it is manageable to this point, but soon it's going to be a problem that's going to transcend what governments can even do to repress and control if they don't start changing radically the way they behave now.
Well, John, in China, where they have a government that lays down the law, and it's really the law, they allow only so many births. In the Western world, we have Catholicism, and we have freedom, and we have all kinds of things, societal things, that say you can reproduce as much as you want to. How will that change?
Well, the problem is that our understanding of freedom is unconscious. We think freedom, and we don't see the equal need for responsibility. That with freedom, there has to be exactly the same measure of responsibility. When people think freedom now, they think, well, I'm free, I can do whatever I want. But that means what you're saying is I don't even want to consider the consequences of my free action. So in a way, where we've been let down is not even at the government level. They're also, in a way, victims of the same problem. We've been let down in the way we've been trained from youth, from childhood on, to see the whole picture. If anything, it's our educators and our historians who are at least equally responsible for the breakdown. People are not being trained to think, to observe the consequences of their actions.
Mm-hmm. All right. East of the Rockies, you are on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Hi. I was wanting to know if there was any mention to a one world government or new world order by Nostradamus.
Yes. There he talks about the blue hat.
The blue hat.
Yeah, of the UN. And it can definitely be applied to his prophecies. And in a way, whether people like it or not, I'm sure a lot of people didn't like cars at the turn of the last century, but it became a reality, for better or worse, that people had to deal with in the 20th century. In the same way, we're at the threshold of dozens of different major changes like that. And one of them is the political systems will have to be revitalized and revolutionized completely. We are living in a future without nations. It is just going to happen, and we need to, rather than resist the reality of it. We need to make sure that that world government works for our individual rights rather than it just become a global police state.
Where are you calling from, sir?
Oh, I'm calling from Winnipeg, Canada.
Winnipeg.
Yes.
All right. Very good. Interesting. So it will happen. This world government, this world, whatever it's going to be, is indeed on the way, right?
Within the next 30 years, nations will, as we know them, will disappear. We will be one world. And it could happen much sooner depending on surprise factors like extraterrestrial discoveries or things like that, which bring the world together overnight.
All right. Wildcard line, you're on the air with John Hogue. Good evening.
Yes. Nostradamus predicts that in 1999, in the 7th month,
yes,
the great king of the, what's it called, Angkor?
The Mongols, yes.
From the skies, and Mars shall reign at will. Is this an invasion?
No, the correct translation is, in 1999, 7 months, the great king of terror will descend from the skies and resurrect the great Mongol, or another way of saying it, the great Genghis Khan. Before and after Mars rules happily. Mars here is used as an astrological metaphor. He often, Nostradamus, uses that. And before and after can mean several things. It's a bit cryptic. Mars has two aspects in predictive astrology. One is war. The other is initiating new adventures. It is the Magus, the high priest of transformation. So it's almost like he's leaving us the either or. Which one do we want to choose? I mean, a lot of people think that the war of the Antichrist that Nostradamus talks about, including I believed it, began in 1973 and would end in 1999. It may very well be that July of 1999 is the beginning of the war of the third Antichrist, and it doesn't end till 2026.
Uh-huh.
John, after wormwood in the Bible, it talks of locusts with things in their tails coming and pestering man for 42 months. I was wondering if this went along with that prophecy.
Well, wormwood in Ukrainian means Chernobyl. And it's actually, I commented on it as one of the 7 final plagues. That Chernobyl radiation was probably one fulfilled. That prophecy might have been fulfilled. Now, many prophets, especially Nostradamus and the Bible prophets, use animals perhaps to describe machines.
Well, I thought that referred to spaceship.
Well, it can, however, it can refer to locusts. It can refer to locust plagues. It can refer to Huey helicopters. It can refer to Apache helicopters who really look like locusts. One has to keep all the potentials open so that when something does come that stirs you, then you might see it. You know, you might recognize what the prophecy means.
John, are you sure that the Chernobyl or wormwood prophecy is yet totally fulfilled? I ask that because 60 Minutes and lots of other credible organizations have recently done stories on the deteriorating sarcophagus that was placed over Chernobyl. Yes. It's cracking, it's beginning to leak, and they're concerned about an explosion.
I wish they would talk about another important point of the IAEA. Maybe we can tell everybody about this, that there are 10 to 11 Chernobyl-style reactors.
Oh, yes.
That have a life expectancy which runs out in 1996.
Including, by the way, John, one that's being built as we speak in Cuba.
Right. And there is a nuclear reactor in Bulgaria that is in a warehouse. It has no shielding whatsoever. Its parts are rusting. Its Russian instructors left town because they weren't being paid, and they left the plans to their students, and it's still running. Now, I'm more amazed that we haven't had another Chernobyl of equal disaster happening, but I think that is one of the highest potentials in the next 5 years. Nostradamus talks about a plague of false dust that will require Southern Europe's evacuation for 9 months. Now, if that doesn't sound like either nuclear terrorism or a nuclear disaster in the Balkans or Italy or what have you, if you look at the wind patterns of the areas, it would, of course, go over those areas.
Where does Southern Europe evacuate to?
Well, he doesn't say much about that. He just says that everything's evacuated from Florence south, Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, the Peloponnesian Peninsula of Greece, and the Southern Balkans. So, the word false dust is really quite remarkable. It also could be a biological plague or something like that too. One has to leave all the options open so that we can heed the warning and change it.
Are you aware now that our government is going to investigate the possibility, as advertised by Joyce Rowley for some time now, that biological agents were used in the Gulf War?
Well, it is an update that I put in Millennium Book of Prophecy before the war when I wrote the first edition. The Grand Teton Council of American Elders, 2 elders, had made a prediction saying that there would be this plague that no one expected that would come out of the Gulf War, and it would spread all over the world. And as you know, a few months ago, we've discovered that on a genetic level, this whatever is brewing in the people's bodies is actually almost like an organism that can be contagious.
And it's spreading. John, we could do hours and hours and hours, and we didn't have enough time. We're out of time. Quickly, the phone number to order your book, The Millennium Book of Prophecy, and, as a matter of fact, your other book, Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecies. What number?
1-800-243-1438.
All right, my friend, out of time. That's it. Networks have to operate by the clock. I'm sorry. We could use hours and hours. Thank you, John. It has been a pleasure.
Same for me. It's been wonderful.
Take care, my friend. John Hogue. And that's it, folks. We're out of time. To get a copy of this program, call beginning now 1-800-917-4278. That's 1-800-917-4278. From the high desert near Dreamland, I'm Art Bell. Good night.